Welcome to eRacing.net's very own podcast. I'm Renate Jungert, ERN's Deputy Editor-in-Chief, and with me today are Senior Duty Editor Laurence Thorn and Editors Bethonie and Topher Smith. Our topic today is the Russian ePrix, so let's jump right into it. Bethonie, what are your thoughts on the race?
After seeing Berlin's track, it didn't look so good because Berlin's had a lot of tight corners. I'm no technical track person, and it just looked wiggly to me. But in Moscow, we didn't get that. I mean, there were stunning views, but it didn't look like that good racing. And compared to the rest of the season altogether, it wasn't the most exciting race there was.
Okay, Laurence, so what are your thoughts on the race?
Well, I really loved the track, I have to say. On paper, it looked a bit strange. Than the map, it looked a bit like a dinosaur to me. Like, you had the head and the tail, and I wasn't sure if it would make a good track or not, but it actually did, because it was so hilly and up and down, and you had all these elevation changes. And in practice and qualifying, you had so many guys like making mistakes, and it's such a high quality of field of drivers that if they were making mistakes, you know the track is challenging. But then actually the race itself, I thought the first stint was actually not that great. Like, there was not that much overtaking happening until the pit stops. And then thanks to Edams being a bit silly, which we'll talk about later, and also thanks to a few different strategies, then we got lots more overtaking in the second half, and I thought the end of the race was really exciting. But the first half was not as good as we've seen in some other tracks. Maybe it was a bit too narrow to pass on, I don't know, but there were some bits that were really narrow, I thought. But overall, I still enjoyed the race. It wasn't the worst race we've seen or anything like that, so it was good.
Okay, so last but not least, Topher, what's your thoughts?
I think the race is pretty much summed up who's going to be in the main title battle when we come to London. Obviously, you had Nelson, Piquet, Di Grassi, and Buemi on the podium. Not mentioning Buemi's disqualification, that's beside the point. But it pretty much shows that those three are going to be the main title protagonists. You've also got Prost, D'Ambrosio, and Bird, who are still mathematically capable of winning the championship. But I don't really see them overtaking any of the top three unless there is a major incident of some sort. Let's say Piquet and Di Grassi take each other out, just as an example off the top of my head. I think we can now see that those three main drivers, Buemi, Di Grassi and Piquet, they're going to be the ones who are fighting out when we come to London.
So the defining factor of the race was the problem with the Edams pit stop, in which they forgot what the correct minimum pit stop time was. So, Laurence, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I thought this mistake was basically, as you said, the whole race-defining mistake, because obviously Edams, for some reason, misunderstood the regulations, or they didn't get the memo about what the pit stop time was. They thought it was 68 seconds, and it was actually 59 seconds, I think. So they basically kept Sebastian Buemi in the pits for 10 seconds too long. And then when he came out right in front of Heidfeld on safe release penalty. So if you include the 10 seconds he was in the pits and the 29-second penalty, they basically lost Buemi 39 seconds in the race. And he finished 40 seconds off the lead. And if you think, he stopped 2 laps later than Piquet, so he had more battery. And he set his fastest lap, Buemi, on the 32nd lap, which was just 3 laps from the end. So he had pace right to the end of the race. Whereas Piquet set his fastest lap on lap 6, and after that he was always saving battery. And Di Grassi in P2 was basically having an overheating battery himself. So I really think if Buemi had not had a bad pit stop and he came out in his regular position, he actually would have won the race, because he had fan boost, he had a better battery, and he was able to show his pace right to the end. And also Prost also lost positions as well, and that's probably ended Prost's chance of winning the championship. If he came out in his regular position, I think he was 5th or 6th or something before the stops, he also could have maybe got even a podium. And then he would have also been in the championship hunt. So it's a really big mistake, and I'm really surprised, actually, that Edams is such an experienced team, so it's quite surprising that they made a mistake like that.
What I find rather remarkable about the Edams pit stop is the fact that, yes, they got the pit stop time wrong, but even though they did, they still got the time for both drivers absolutely spot on for what they believed was a pit stop time. Like I said, it was 68, 69 seconds, whatever it was. And they got it absolutely spot on for both drivers. So if they had known that it was actually 58 seconds and not 68, like you said, imagine where Edams could have finished if they'd had their drivers further up the order.
Definitely, yeah.
You said Edams pitted late?
Yeah, Buemi pitted 2 laps after Piquet and 1 lap after Di Grassi, so he would have had more battery at the end as well.
Wouldn't they have seen all the other teams pitting 10 seconds faster than what they thought they should have been.
You say that, but it might be a case of they're watching their own pit stops rather than looking at the others, concentrating on them getting the time right. So
I thought it would be something like that, but
well, you make a good point that they could be watching other teams, but at the same time, I don't really think they want to dedicate time to watching others when they have to concentrate on themselves.
Maybe they'll change that next time then, right?
Quite possibly.
Over to next door's garage. Can I just check what it's supposed to be? Just one more time.
One of the most remarkable incidents of the race was the last lap incident between Jean-Eric Vergne and Sébastien Buemi, which wouldn't have happened without Edam's pit stop problem. So it's been much debated. So what are your thoughts on that, Topher?
Well, I thought the actual start to the incident itself, when Buemi actually went off the circuit, I saw that as more or less a racing incident. There wasn't much in it. It's just a case of getting pushed out. He had to take to the chicane. But what I got confused about with that was the fact that when Buemi slowed down to let Jean-Eric Vergne back through, which he rightly did, Vergne didn't take the place back. I don't really know why. Like, I'm guessing Vergne was like unsure of what Buemi was doing, or maybe he was trying to like get Buemi to have a penalty. I don't know. I found it really strange what happened in the aftermath of that incident.
Yeah, I found it really strange as well, because it's clear from the onboard footage that you saw that Buemi slowed right down. You can hear the engine note. He's gone right down, and he's basically like sitting there like a lemon, and Jev is sitting there like a lemon next to him, and nothing's happening. And the funniest thing was the way Heidfeld just said, okay, I'm just going to take advantage of this, and just basically went right past Jev, and then bumped Buemi right up the rear and tried to pass Buemi on the last lap as well, which he didn't manage, but I just found that really good, how Heidfeld showed this really like veteran presence to like take advantage of that incident. And as for the incident itself, I thought Buemi probably was taking a few liberties cutting the track. But then again, Vergne had the fastest lap, and he had it disallowed for cutting the track. So you can obviously see in previous laps, Vergne was cutting the track himself to probably stay ahead of Buemi. So maybe it was just a racing incident. And I think the fact that Buemi tried to let him pass means he was correctly not punished for it. Obviously, the stewards punished Buemi for the unsafe release, but the actual chicane incident they didn't punish him for, so I think that was the right decision, because he actually tried his best to let Vergne pass, and if Vergne doesn't take it, then Buemi can't do anything. He can't just stop and get out of the car and wait, you know? He has to carry on his race too, or Heidfeld would have passed him as well, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point about that. And I think Heidfeld there showed like just how good a veteran he is. Like, the good thing about a racing driver is they know when to attack, but they also know when to hang back and wait for the opportunity. And that's exactly what Heidfeld did, pouncing on the instant to come through and take a podium.
Yeah, definitely, and it was well-deserved, actually, because in Berlin he drove really well, Heidfeld, and then the last few laps I think his battery had a problem, so he dropped back a bit, but he was near the podium anyway, and then obviously in Moscow he got the podium he deserved, so his last few races have been really impressive, actually.
I think his podium as well is well overdue and well-deserved. So he should have won the race in Beijing, could have possibly won the race in Punta del Este. Had he not had the drive-through penalty in Buenos Aires, he would have won it as well. There's so many things that have gone wrong for Heidfeld. I think this podium finally given him something to show for this season.
Yeah, he's had a funny season. It's been kind of half driver error and half bad luck. It's been a mix of the two, I think. Every race he seems to have had something going wrong, so I'm glad he had something going right for him this time. Because he's a good driver, so he deserves some success.
Oh yeah, he's an exceptional driver, I can't deny that. I think what would be good now for him is if he can get another podium in London, maybe even a victory. That would probably help his confidence no end going into Season 2.
Definitely, he could probably be a title contender going into Season 2 if he has that momentum, as you said.
Well, he should be a title contender this season, really, but like I said, mixture of driver error and penalties and whatnot. It's just one of those seasons for Heidfeld, but I think we'll definitely see him nearer the sharper end next season.
Indeed. How did you see the chicane incident, Bethonie, yourself?
I thought it was just a racing incident that caused Buemi to skip the chicane, and he didn't really have much choice than to skip the chicane, and he shouldn't. It was good he didn't get a penalty for that, especially when he tried to give Jev back the place. He's lucky to not lose at place to Heidfeld through that as well. Obviously, he in the end lost place due to the penalty, but he could have lost it on the track as well.
Definitely. I mean, you could see at the end, Heidfeld basically bumped Buemi right on the rear and basically almost got past himself as well. So Buemi was a bit lucky that Heidfeld didn't get past on track, although it didn't make a difference in the end, but it could have done.
So with only one round to go in the championship and 2 races to win, the championship battle is heating up pretty well. So the question is, who's going to be the first one to win the Formula E championship? And that's a question for you, Laurence.
Well, I think this question's a tough one, because I think if you put it down to pure driving performances and pure performances over the season, I'd have to say Degrassi, because I think Degrassi has been the model of consistency in this season. I mean, he won the first race, the second 2 and third race he was on the podium. The next couple of races he had issues, either suspension failure or battery issues. Then he was back on the podium. Then he won in Berlin, which was taken away from him, and then podium in Moscow. So every race he did not have a problem. He was always on the podium every time. He didn't make any driving errors in any races. The only retirements were suspension failure and an overheating battery. So you can see Degrassi's been the consistent guy throughout the whole season. And I think, in my opinion, he deserves the championship. And I think he's proven that he's the best driver in the field. The only issue for him is Berlin. Because in Berlin, he was immaculate. He was so quick. I mean, me and Rainey were at the race sitting in the grandstand, and every lap he came past, we were counting his lead, and it kept growing and growing and growing. And it got to 15 seconds, and we basically gave up because it was so big, right? So I think he deserved to win in Berlin, and I think he was unlucky, obviously, to have the win taken away. I can understand why it was, because the car was illegal, but it's unfortunate for him, because obviously he drove the race, honestly, not knowing about that, so it's a shame, because now, obviously, PK's in the lead. He's got a 17-point lead, I think it is, which is quite big. I know there's 60 points on offer, but PK's been quite consistent himself, so the chance of Degrassi, outscoring PK without winning a race is quite slim. And he hasn't won a race now since Beijing, so I think Degrassi needs at least 1 win, if not 2. I think he is still my favourite, because Degrassi showed how consistent he was this year. But PK has also done a very good job in the second half of the season, and he's really shown that he's also a title favourite. I don't think Buemi will win after Moscow, because he lost too many points, and I don't think he can claw them back. But definitely, of the 2 Brazilians, I think Degrassi's driving performances make him deserve the title, but the penalty from Berlin might mean PK takes it by a few points. So it's tough to say, actually, but I think Degrassi might just nick it, because I have a feeling PK might have a bad race somehow, but I'm not sure. Degrassi for me, that's what I'm saying.
I would have to agree. Back at the beginning of the season, I said Degrassi was going to win the championship, just because he won a race and we got asked after the first race. So statistically, he was the best to win the championship. But looking at it now, I think he's most likely to win. But when I say a driver's going to do well, or when I want a driver to do well, they generally don't. So on that basis, I think it's most likely PK's going to win.
I mentioned earlier about thinking that it's only going to be the top 3 in contention, PK, Degrassi and Buemi. So I'm going to stick with that. They've had 3 very different seasons, I found. Like Laurence said earlier, Degrassi's been Mr. Consistent throughout the season. I think he's had podiums 60 or 70% of the races so far. He's been up there all of the time. PK started off a bit slow and sort of moved his way up the field to a point where he's now regularly fighting for wins and podiums. Whereas Buemi, he's been, in my opinion anyway, the top performer out of anyone throughout the whole season. Just been very unlucky in places like with Moscow when he had the penalty. So 3 very different seasons, but if I had to choose one champion, I think just based on the momentum that he's carrying behind him at the moment, I'm going to have to go for Nelson Piquet.
See, I think you say you see Buemi as unlucky, but for me, I think Buemi's also made too many mistakes. I think it was Buenos Aires, he was leading the race with Degrassi behind him, and he basically just crashed into the wall under pressure. He just lost it under pressure. We've not seen PK or Degrassi make a mistake like that. Any mistakes they may have made have been maybe small ones, like a small lock-up or something, but they've not lost a win because of it. Buemi in Buenos Aires was quickest in both FP sessions, and he was on pole, and he led the first stint, and he just crashed. So for me, that one error, to me, I would not class Buemi as the best performer because of that. He's obviously won 2 races really well, but I think he's been so up and down that for me, he doesn't really deserve the championship. I think 3rd place is good for him. I think definitely the 2 Brazilians have shown through their consistency that they're, I think, the 2 best drivers in the field at the moment, in my opinion.
If you look at the fact that Buemi in lots of practice sessions and qualifying, he's always been up there. It's always been free practice 1 Buemi, free practice 2 Buemi, qualifying Buemi. So yeah, like you said, in Buenos Aires he had his crash, but that could happen to anyone really. It just happened to Buemi in this case. I think in terms of general outright performance and pace, Buemi has to be regarded as possibly the best in the field.
Yeah, but a championship isn't won on free practice or qualifying speed. A championship's won on the racetrack in the races itself. Obviously, yeah, he's got great pace. He might be the quickest driver in the field. Degrassi, for instance, has not got a fastest lap or a pole position this year, whereas Buemi has got 2 pole positions and I think 1 fastest lap. I'm not sure, I have to check that. But Buemi's had the pace, but you win a championship not just through pace, you win it through consistency as well. And I just think he's lacked that. So he could still win the championship, don't get me wrong. If he has a weekend like Monaco where he was on pole and won, he could win the championship. But I just feel like the inconsistencies he showed this season might stop him from taking that.
Do you think being under pressure in London would have the same effects as the crash towards the end of the race where he would have won?
Yeah, I think that having been to London myself and walked around it, the track is very challenging. It's so hilly and up and down, and it cambers a lot, and it's not really flat anywhere. You're always kind of, when you're braking or turning, you're always kind of braking on a bit of an incline. So if you are under pressure from the driver behind and you're kind of like looking in your mirrors and you're not really concentrating on the track ahead of you, it'll be very easy to make a mistake. And I'm positive we'll see some driving errors there because it's not going to be an easy track. Berlin, for instance, was really flat. So as long as you basically learned the track layout, you were fine. We didn't see any retirements in Berlin because of that. But London's going to be different because if you take your eye off the track for 1 second and you miss your braking point, you're going to kind of like go on a part of the track that's really tilted or where you can't really stop, and if you go offline, you're going to hit the wall. And I think a driver like Piquet or Degrassi, who does not make as many mistakes, will be the favourite in that case. And I think Degrassi's overall consistency, if he can manage to win at least one race, he might just take the title by a few points. But I think Buemi not have the consistency to do it, because we have to remember, it's unlike any other ePrix before. This is over 2 days. It's not just one race and then we go somewhere else. This is 2 races on the same track. And if you make a mistake in the first race, maybe it will play on your mind a bit in the second race. So we have to also consider that the drivers who are consistent might do better.
So we do have 3 obvious favourites, but the championship, there are still more drivers in the championship than these 3. And the other contenders who still have at least a mathematical chance of winning the championship are Nicolas Prost, Jerome D'Ambrosio and Sam Bird. So do you think any of these has enough chance to win the championship, Topher?
Well, there's still a mathematical chance, like you said. It is a bit more unlikely for them, given that the top 3 have so much form at the moment. I think Prost has been a bit of an underachiever so far. So he started off the season really well with a pole position in Beijing and almost victory. Pole position again in Putrajaya before being taken away from him. Win in Miami as well. So he has been up there fighting for points and for victories, but he's just tailed off a bit towards the end of the year. He does still have a chance, but he's going to have to pull something out of the bag if he's going to take it, given his recent form. Jerome D'Ambrosio, he's been, for me, other than Degrassi, the most consistent in this championship. I think he's been in the points in all but one race so far, correct me if I'm wrong on that, including his victory in Berlin. I think given the fact that he's had that consistency and he's now got that victory on his name, if any of them 3 are going to take the title away from Piquet, Degrassi or Buemi, I'm going to go for D'Ambrosio actually, just on the basis of his consistency and the fact that he's always improving. The final mention, Sam Bird, he's been a real surprise to me this season. I thought he'd be right up there with Buemi and Degrassi fighting for the championship. Started off well, podium in Beijing and victory in Putrajaya, but he's been so disappointing towards the end of the year. The only way he can really get the title now is if he was to have a perfect weekend in London. So I would like to see him do well, but in terms of the title, I don't think Bird has much of a chance.
I'd have to agree with pretty much everything. I think it would go, in my order of the final 3, would be D'Ambrosio, then Prost, and then Bird. I'd quite like to see Bird do it because it would just be brilliant and it would just be hilarious. And I quite like the people who don't do so well. So I'd quite like to see Bird do it, but I think if for some reason Degrassi, PK and Remy couldn't complete the final 2 races, and it would be D'Ambrosio who would take the championship, I think.
I'd have to agree with that as well. He's finished in the points, I think, in 7 out of 9 races. I think Buenos Aires he didn't finish because of a technical issue, and in Moscow he had a really bad pit stop. So every race he's actually not had an issue. He's always been in the points. And I think when we worked out the positions gained for the championship analysis we did in the last issue of E-News, I think he made up something like 4.77 positions a lap, which is the best of any of the title contenders. So he's never the best qualifier, but he always makes up positions in the race, D'Ambrosio. He's a really good overtaker, and he's also really smart. And I have to agree that, like Degrassi, he's the next most consistent driver. And it's a real shame in Moscow that he had an issue with his pit stop, because he qualified well, he was racing well. I think he was 5th in the first stint. Then he had this really awful pit stop, like 30 seconds too long, that dropped him right down the order. If he'd have got 4th or 5th place in that race, he'd probably be ahead of Prost in the championship by now, and he'd be like maybe 20 or 30 points off the title lead, rather than now he's about 50 points off. So it's really unlikely he can win. I'd really love to see him do it. And in Berlin, Jerome drove so well, he was so aggressive, and when Degrassi got excluded, D'Ambrosio definitely deserved the win, because his race was amazing. I don't see Prost challenging, because he's only got 15 points in the last 4 races, which is not like championship form. Whereas PK's got about, 75 points in the last 3 races, and Degrassi's got similar. So if we assume he'd have won in Berlin, his performances were that good. So I feel it will be D'Ambrosio, then Prost, then Bird as well. I think Bird's got a lot of talent, but his last races, he was either really unlucky or he just had some poor performances, and he has not really, since Putriaio when he won, he's not even been on the podium since. So I think we have to say Bird is ruled out of the championship fight. So I believe it will be D'Ambrosio, then Prost, then Bird. I don't think any of them will win the championship. I think they're just too far back, because PK and Degrassi are so consistent that it'll be very hard to topple them.
Okay, so that's it for the first episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and we're always happy to hear your comments, compliments and critique, or ideas of what you would like to have discussed in our second episode. So tweet us, email us, we're happy to hear from you. Until then, we wish you a very warm goodbye and a wonderful day. See you soon.